Okay, so patch 7.13 rundown. Pretty small patch. Not a lot of huge changes. Most of them I feel like are pretty nice. So just gonna get right into it. I'm gonna skip all the honor stuff because that's not really important. So Galio, base armor down, Winds of War, damage down, base damage down, ability power ratio up, and hero's entrance channel is longer. So this is a really good change. It shouldn't necessarily kill mid lane Galio, but now you actually have to build like actual AP items to get the free wave clear that he currently has. You can't just build full tank and wave clear for free, and he's easier to punish now for AD champions, which is how it should be. His armor was like really high for no real reason when he's supposed to be a champion that's supposed to counter. He's supposed to be an MR tank essentially, but he had pretty high base armor, so some of the laners had a lot of problem actually like harassing him, like Jarvan and, well, maybe not Jarvan, like Kled does really well, but like stuff like, actually yeah, more stuff like Jarvan and Camille had problems with him just because like, yeah, he can kind of not lane against you because he just built tank and then wave cleared with Q anyway, so you're stuck just having to clear the minions because he's already killed the wave and you can't fight him with his armor plus all the minions hitting you. So that's really nice. And Hero's entrance channel up is really nice too because when you go gank him, as soon as you, like, it's very easy for him to just eat your hard CC, and if he doesn't have another escape, like, he can't, like, you're blocking his, like, dash, you just R it away, kind of like how Pantheon does. But the thing is, Galio is so tanky, and the channel was so short that you couldn't really stop him from doing that either. He was just really difficult to handle. So I really like these changes. I don't think mid lane Galio is cancerous. I think mid lane Galio was cancerous because you could build full tank and still be unkillable. I mean, you could build full tank and still be unkillable, but you could still wave clear like better than most mids. So that was just really stupid. I think it's fine. Mid lane Galio is fine if you have to build AP to actually wave clear because then you can actually punish him. So Gnar, base damage on Boomerang throw up, Mega E crunch up. So this is just great QO. It's not really QOL changes. It's just straight buffs. Boomerang is the first max, so having free base damage on that when it's so spammable in lane is really nice. Gnar is supposed to be a lane bully, but he can't really handle a lot of... He was struggling with a decent amount of champions just because beforehand when he got nerfed from when he was a lane bully before, they were just too heavy and he couldn't handle them anymore. And the crunch, the E in Super Gnar form or Mega Gnar form is really low range. It's quite awkward to use. So giving an extra range I think is really nice. I don't think this will make him like overtune or anything, but I think it's gonna put him in a good spot. I think it's gonna put him in a good spot that you'll start seeing him again. I think some teams have already started picking him again, but now I think every team will start like looking into Gnar to add to their top lane champion pool because these are some really nice changes. So Kennen, electrical surge base damage changed to bonus, and it's got an AP ratio now too. And the big change here is that Runons no longer gives you extra stacks. So this won't kill AD Kennen, but it is a pretty significant nerf. It'll definitely drop Kennen in priority. I don't think he'll be necessarily... I don't think you'll see like Kennen first pick, first ban priority anymore. Just because Kennen already... He's not a great champion in solo queue just because, one, if he falls behind as the AD build, he's quite useless. And two, he doesn't really start beating... He wins lane, but he doesn't start having the pressure to just like kill people and shove them like under turret in like 2-3 waves until like 2-3 items, usually 3 items. And by then in solo queue, a bunch of shit has usually happened because it's very hard to rein in your team in solo queue to just play around your split pressure. So you'll he's already not a great solo queue pick. I think you'll start seeing him even less in solo queue. I still think the teams that play Kennen in competitive will still play Kennen in competitive, just because he still fulfills the same thing. It's just gonna be his team fight isn't going to be as good now for the AD build because the Runons will no longer grant it, and it'll be a little slower for him to destroy people in the split push, but at the end of the day, he's still a ranged champion who's extremely slippery and has an AD ratio that is spammable. So this is actually, the damage is more significant than you might think because AD Kennen doesn't really build a lot of bonus attack damage. Like, you get a lot of attack speed items, You get like 25 AD from Bork, and you get like 30 from Mallet, but that's really not a lot of AD. Like one Infinity Edge is already like more AD than those two items combined. Cannon's usually just been like an uh, attack speed based champion, so this nerf actually hits him pretty hard. It might honestly just take him out now that I think about it more, because I don't think he'll actually be able to beat a lot of split pushers until 4 item. He's still going to destroy all the tanks in the split push, but against champions who he already had kind of a close split push against, like Camille and like Fiora, it's going to take even longer for him to get to the point where he can beat them solidly in the split. So expect Cannon to get picked a lot less, and like I said earlier, he really wasn't a great pick in solo queue, and just buffing the AP ratio on E as well. More incentive to play AP Cannon, which I don't think is terrible. There's a few people who still play AP Cannon with success. So yeah, good change overall. AD Cannon is just too strong right now. Might be a bit too heavy-handed of a nerf, but AP Cannon should still be viable or right on the cusp of viable, so it's not like Cannon's like getting dumpstered. So Kha'Zix, taste their fear, base damage down, ratio down, isolation, bonus damage up. So just good change. Kha'Zix does way too much damage right now, even if you're not isolated. He just blows you up in a 2v2 anyway. And with all the other early game junglers getting nerfed except for Elise, Kha'Zix has just been climbing up in popularity. He's just too strong. Graves and Lee Sin being strong, as well as like Ivern and stuff, was like kind of tempering how much you saw Kha'Zix, but after they got hit by all their nerfs, Kha'Zix was starting to grow in popularity, and I do believe he does a bit too much damage to people who aren't isolated, so I really like this change. And Void Assault, I really like this change too, just because right now pretty much no one evolves R, so just giving people at least an incentive to evolve R, so it's a real choice rather than Q, W, E, or Q, E, W every game. It's really nice. I still don't think it's worth it to really evolve R, but having the option, like making this an actual like viable option, I don't know if this will be the change that does it, but the fact that they're looking to make it a viable option is something I really like. So Kindred, passive increases range more often, WND damage up, 75 range at 4 stacks, 25 every 3 stacks thereafter. Okay, that's definitely a good change, because getting the 4 stacks feels great, but then it seems like it takes forever to get the next 4, because just the nature of how the stacks work. It starts getting put on more difficult things to get stacks on. And the fact that 25 range really isn't that big a deal. I think this is a fine change. Kindred's still a bit weak after the last patch since the rework, so any help she could get is nice. I think 3 is a good number as opposed to 4. I think making it 2 would be too much, so I like it that it's at 3. Just a little bit extra damage on W and higher base damage on E. They're both pretty slight. This one actually isn't that slight. It's a double, but it's a double in damage, but you don't really get the damage on W too often. I think this E base change is really nice because E feels really bad at the moment. It really doesn't do that much base damage. So Kindred, I feel like it's a champion that she has to be like at least decently strong early game, because otherwise they just walk all over you, take your marks, and kill you, and you just never become useful. I think you have to be really careful without making her too strong, because if she's too strong and she just brute forces every mark, then the champion's imbalanced. I just think in general Kindred's a pretty difficult champion to balance. But I think these are like a step in the right direction. I think I'm starting to get really afraid though, because Riot has a pretty long history of, oh, this champion is weak on rework or release, so they buff it, and then it still doesn't get played very often, and then they buff it again, and they buff it again, and buff it again, to the point where like one person starts playing it, realizes it's broken, and then everyone starts playing it, and then they have to nerf the champion again. I think Kindred's heading towards that state. I don't think she's at that state yet, but I think after this they should leave her alone for a few patches at least and see how the win rate and stuff shakes out, because I think she's starting to get to that point. I think this is 3 patches where she's buffed in a row, so take note of that. I think she's playable with this for sure. Obviously, it's a lot more preferable to not have to pick her into Elise or Lee Sin or Reksai or champions who just have like dominating early games. But I think at this point, she's probably okay. as long as you play intelligently around your marks and you pick her in situations where you have like naturally pretty strong lanes, because a lot of how your lanes a lot of how marks work is that your laners need to help you, but if your laners are just losing, then you kind of just lose all your marks. So Maokai, base health up, Nature's Grasp, range up, cooldown down. Really nice. Maokai just isn't getting played at all because his kit is just, there's a lot of power in his E, but the thing is his E isn't super useful in lane because you usually want to be maxing Q in lane. And they took a lot of the base power at level 1 rank out of his W. So any buffs he can get, this base health one is really nice. His base health is really low for a tank. And more range on R is really, really nice when you think about how the ability works, because it's a slow moving thing. That's usually just a zone control. It doesn't really hit people very often because of how slow it is. So the fact that it goes longer, so it zones even more range, and for longer, it zones even more terrain away from the enemy team. And I'm assuming because the range increases, like it's gonna last longer. It's gonna like stay out longer because it has to travel further. It just means he has even more control around an area when he casts ults, which is really nice. Because obviously, like his new ultimate, I think most people will agree it's weaker than the old ultimate just because of the loss of damage reduction. So any way they can add power to it, in a way that it'll like kind of fulfill the same functions as the old ultimate, I think is really nice. So Q health ratio up, just a straight buff. Poppy's kind of fallen out of play as well as Maokai. I don't think she's definitely not as bad as Maokai, but I think this is a buff that will get people to start looking into it again while not making her oppressive. So I think it's a fine change because Poppy has pretty much disappeared. So Rek'Sai, Void Rush ratio up, and then just some QOL changes. Knockback effect for 7. Okay. So I think this is fine. New Rek'Sai is really strong. Falls off late game really hard for most builds just because you pretty much have to build AD now. Like Warrior into Cleaver into Tank is the most common one. Some people even do Warrior Titanic, Cleaver into Tank, or just Warrior Titanic. But the champion's very AD heavy as opposed to the old build. Even more incentive on it. I don't feel like this ultimate eats the ratio. I think it'd be better to just give it a bit more execute damage, but I guess the ratio is fine too. Just keeps incentivizing people to build AD, which is how I think Rek'Sai should be played. And the ultimate, what I was saying earlier, is it's very clunky. This HUD ping stuff, the cooldown and the prey mark, not the prey mark, the cooldown thing, and the fact that you can't ping it unless it's ready is really awkward. But I'm thinking more along the lines of like the usability of it, because it usually flies you like past your target. Obviously you can still miss as a target ability, which is a bit weird. But it kind of like locks you out of like your other spells right around when you land, which is like the biggest part of it. So these unburrow things and the spell Qs when you're attacking, I think will help a lot with it. I still feel like they might need a QOL change some of when you land with R, but Rek'Sai's already in a pretty good spot, so I think these changes are fine. So Shaco, base damage up, change from total to bonus AD, that's good. Change to physical, rip AB Shaco, but I think that's fine because it's really hard to balance champions around 2 builds anyway. And does actual additional damage on missing health. Okay, so I don't like Shaco, but I think these changes are a step in the right direction. If you're gonna play Shaco, he's at least like the Shaco build currently is like that really tanky Titanic Trinity Force build, which is extremely cancerous because if he's ahead, then he just runs you down because he's unkiteable with like his slow and double clone. But the thing is, like if you're behind, you just don't do enough damage to kill anyone. But the thing is, like building full squishy just makes you useless. So incentivizing people to like build squishy again, to fulfill Shaco and rewarding them for it, I think is a really good change. I think this probably kills AP Shaco, but like I said, it's pretty difficult to balance both. So I think picking AD as the one to balance around is smart. It sucks for AP Shaco players, but I'm sure they'd rather their champion be viable at least some sort. In some shape without having to do the really troll Titanic Trinity Force build. So I think these changes are good. Trundle can chomp again, turrets again. That's a huge trade. That's a huge change. You can actually split push fast again. And Chomp has more consistent timing and scales better with attack speed. Okay, good QOL change. And increased healing and regen was already giving 25 lifesteal. So that's good. Trundle is a champion you'd think you'd see in a split push meta, but he just he doesn't push that fast because they removed his ability to chomp turrets, and also Trundle just doesn't beat a lot of the champions in 1v1. Like, he doesn't beat Cannon, he doesn't beat Fiora, and I think he beats Camille, but the thing is, like, he pushes really slow too. And part of split pushing is, like, Trundle is it's very hard for Trundle to kill people. It's very easy for Trundle to push people out of the lane, but the thing is, if you push people out of the lane and you still can't kill the turret quickly, then you're still not a very good split pusher. So adding the fact that you can chop turrets back again is really nice. Do I think it'll push him into viability? Maybe, now that Cannon is going to fall a bit out of priority, but it's still hard to say because Trundle is such a odd champion, and Fiora is still a thing. But I think it's a step in the right direction for sure. I think this is a really nice change too, because current Xayah feels really awkward that you just get completely locked out of your auto attack after your Q, at least scaling it with the attack speed so that it's not as stupid as before where it was literally just like a free snare. But now as like you get to the later game, like that ability to free snare comes back, which I think is good. It was mostly oppressive in lane phase because you were just auto Q and then it's a free snare, set up your support straight into an all-in. So good change. Good change. Ramus is nothing. Okay, so change to Catalyst plus Negatron gives mana and health. Okay, that's good. A lot of tanks struggle from not having a good mana item. The only real good mana items were Righteous Glory, which doesn't give mana anymore ever since the change in the tank update, or a few patches ago. I don't think it was a tank update. So the only mana tank item is Frozen Heart, but Frozen Heart feels bad to build most of the times because it doesn't give health. So now you have an item that's gives MR and mana, and obviously the Abyssal passives too. So I think this is a really good exchange because, yeah, currently Abyssal Mask isn't that great of a spot. I thought it'd be a lot better than it was, but once I started playing with it, I realized like why it wasn't so good. So good change, gives more health too, a little bit more expensive, a little less MR, but you get this nice passive to. So it's like a viable like item to like rush first now instead of having to rush like Visage, which still feels really awkward for tanks. So Adaptive Helm, health increase, that's good. Adaptive Helm sounds really nice in theory, but the stats of the item are kind of just not there. So most people are still building Visage, so more incentive to build it, so it's more of a choice between Visage or Adaptive rather than say like, oh, I'm just getting Visage because of the stats, so good change. Ancient Coin gold rewards increase, good. Ancient Coin's still a bit weaker than the other two, Relic Shield and Spell Thieves, so any buffs to bring it into line, so once again you have to choose between which one's best on the situation. I think is really nice. Zeke's Convergence, just icon update, that's whatever. Missing mana, okay, yeah, I think this is a fine change. This is actually really nice, because it's a pretty significant step up from Hunter's Talisman to the Skirmishers, Stalkers or Trackers Life regen, and just buffing that even more I think is completely fine. Because, yeah, you really will well, you really should be taking blue buff from your mid laners, but it just feels really awkward because it's tough for mana reliant junglers outside of like Elise to keep up with like the resourceless junglers like Reksai and Lee Sin, and I guess technically Graves isn't resourceless, but he uses very little mana. Usually doesn't use very much mana compared to the other junglers, and the thing is people don't really necessarily like building Runic like Gragas and stuff. Like it's okay on like Gragas and like Sejuani and stuff, but one, you run because you have to give blue buffs to your mid laner, and two, it's like an odd transition because you farm so much faster with Runic and you have so much more mana sustain. Whereas if you do Cinder, like they say here, it doesn't do that much damage to minions. So if you do Cinder, you trade a lot of early game pressure, which isn't how it should be. So I think you'll start to see a lot more Cinder Hulk over Runic on tank junglers like Gragas and stuff, who are like kind of on the fence about which one to do, which is nice because you don't want to have to sack your early game as a jungler to build Cinder Hulk, but that's kind of how it feels like right now if you don't build Runic, just because of the mana thing and also the fact that you just farm too slow a Cinder and it's too expensive to back with 1100 gold. It's the same reason Tiamat isn't really being built on many junglers anymore, because it's just too hard to get 1200 on your first buy, despite the fact that Tiamat's a better buy than like Warhammer or like double longsword boots. It's just too hard to get to 1200, and it's too hard to get to 1100 too. So lowering the build path I think is really, really nice, and upping the damage I think are all great changes. I'm really looking forward to this because, like I said earlier, it just feels like you're forced to build Runic even if your champion doesn't really like it. Whereas the Cinder Hulk and the change and these mana changes and this gold drop on Cinder will make it a lot easier for you to stomach having to go. It'll make it a lot easier to stomach going Cinder Hulk. And it's really nice, especially because another thing I want to say is Gargoyle Stoneplate plus Locket is really good to build on tanks at the moment. But it's really awkward to build Stoneplate Locket after Runic Echoes because you literally are a tank and you have 0 health items if that's the case, because Stoneplate only gives you that health once you're in combat. And if you use it when you're low, it doesn't give you nearly as much benefit as you do when you use it when you're healthy. But it's harder to get into a point when you're engaging when you're healthy, just because you don't have a health pool to draw off of. And oftentimes you'll get CC'd down and bursted before you can hit your Stoneplate as you engage. And if you have that Runic Echoes, Locket, Stoneplate build and you don't get off your actives, then you just insta-die. So it's really awkward, because you want to build Cinder Hulk so you have some HP to pull off of, so you're safer when you Stoneplate and Locket and stuff. But at the same time, it sacked your early game, so you couldn't really do that feeling good. You kind of usually had to buy an HP item or 2 before you went into Stoneplate Locket, so your build just kind of felt restricted. So I really like this change. It'll definitely help tank junglers more than I think most people will realize, and just Herald giving more gold, and that's about it. So really good patch in my opinion. I really wish there was another Zac nerf or an Elise nerf, but most of the changes have a lot of thought behind them, and I think they're all pretty good changes. There's a lot of logic based in pretty much all of them. So I'm looking forward to this patch. Yeah, that's about it.